Hello and welcome back to the lesson. The subject is advanced taxation. In our today's lesson, going to continue with the topic professional practice in taxation. Professional practice in taxation. The lesson is matters relating to new clients. Matters relating to new clients. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain or outline matters relating to new clients. And candidates, when dealing with new clients in the professional tax practice, there are several considerations and procedures that come into play to ensure efficient service delivery, compliance, and ethical conduct. In our today's lesson, we will highlight some of the matters relating to new clients. Matters relating to new clients. The first matter is initial consultation. Initial consultation. Initial consultation as well as engagement. We can say initial consultation and engagement. This is the first matter relating to new clients. I've said that when dealing with new clients, a tax professional has to put into consideration certain matters. The first one is initial consultation and engagement. That means A, conducting an initial consultation. And the purpose for conducting an initial consultation is to understand the client's needs, to understand the client's tax situation, and also objectives. Do you understand? Conducting an initial consultation, conducting an initial consultation. And the purpose for conducting an initial consultation is in order for the tax professional to understand the new client's needs, to understand the new client's objectives, and also tax situation. Another purpose for initial consultation is for the tax professional to understand the scope, to determine or understand. Let me use the word determine. To determine the scope of the client's objectives. To understand or determine the scope of the client's objectives. Okay? The scope of services, the scope of objectives, right? And that can only happen when there is that initial engagement. The tax professional can have a meeting, an initial meeting with the client so that they can discuss and determine the scope of services required, and they can then agree on the terms of engagement, right? The client's objectives or services, and then agree on the terms of engagement. So there ought to be an agreement between the client and the tax professional. There has to be an agreement on the terms before beginning the work. So matter number one, initial consultation and engagement. The purpose is to conduct an initial consultation in order to understand the client's needs and the tax situation. B is to determine the scope of the client's services, then agree on the terms of engagement. Do you understand? That is number one. Then number two is to carry out due diligence. Due diligence. The tax professional, when dealing with a new client, should carry out due diligence and client identification. And client identification. Should carry out due diligence and client identification. The purpose here is to verify the client's identity. Due diligence will help the tax professional to verify client's identity. It will help the tax professional to verify the client's identity, to as well as business operations and financial standing. The tax professional can only understand the client's financial standing after carrying out due diligence and client identification. That's a very important matter when dealing with new clients. The other purpose for due diligence is to collect relevant documentation. Due diligence also enables the tax professional to collect the relevant documentation such as financial records, tax returns, legal documents, and so on. Due diligence. Due diligence. Verify client's identity, the financial standing, collect relevant documentation, and so on. Collect relevant documentation. Collect necessary documentation. 3, conflict of interest and independence. Conflict of interest and independence is a very important matter, and this is to ensure there are no conflicts of interest that may compromise the professional's objectivity and independence. The professional should assess if there is any conflict of interest before taking up the job, so that there is no matter or interest that could compromise his or her objectives. The purpose is to ensure there is no conflict of interest that may compromise objectivity and independence. That may compromise objectivity and independence. And here again, the auditor may assess any potential conflicts with existing clients or any personal relationships that could affect the engagement. Conflict of interest. Number 4, we are studying the matters relating to new clients. Number 4 is understanding the client's understanding the client's tax profile. The fourth matter is to understand the client's tax profile. Understanding the client's tax profile by gathering comprehensive information. 1. Gather comprehensive information about the client's tax history, business activities, investments, financial goals, and so on. Comprehensive history. Assess the client's risk tolerance. The professional should assess the client's risk tolerance level. Assess the client's risk tolerance level. Assess the client's risk tolerance level and also their approach to tax compliance. And their approach to tax compliance, as well as their approach to tax planning. That can only be done where the tax professional carries out or gathers comprehensive information. 5, another matter when dealing with a new client is engagement letter. Engagement letter and terms of service. Engagement letter and terms of service. This involves drafting and presenting an engagement letter. Drafting and presenting an engagement letter. The tax professional is required to draft and present an engagement letter outlining the services to be provided. Within the engagement letter, the tax professional should also indicate the fees, should indicate responsibilities, should indicate the expectations, and so on. Drafting. But drafting is not enough, and presenting is not enough. The tax profession should ensure that the client understands the terms and conditions of the engagement. He should also obtain the consent of the client based on the engagement letter drafted and presented. Ensure the client understands. So that there are no conflicts later on. The terms of the engagement, and also seek consent. Seek the consent of the client on the matters outlined, regarding the matters outlined in the engagement letter. Ensure the client understands the terms and conditions of the engagement and obtain consent. Obtain the consent from the client. Ensure the client understands the terms and conditions and seek their consent. Number 6, compliance and regulatory requirements. Compliance and regulatory requirements is another matter relating to new clients. Here, the tax professional should ensure the client meets all the necessary regulatory requirements, such as tax registrations, tax registrations such as tax filings, such as compliance with tax laws, and so on. All right? Other than checking if the client has complied, the tax professional should educate the client. Educate the client, and this education could be in relation to their obligations and deadlines regarding tax compliance. Educate the client on their obligations and deadlines regarding tax compliance. Regarding tax compliance. So that those are matters under compliance and regulatory requirements. Then number 7, we can identify another matter, which is the client intake process. Client intake process as well as documentation. Client intake process and documentation. And this is done by establishing a structured client intake process, including documentation requirements and information gathering protocol. Here, the tax professional may also create a file for the new client that includes all the relevant documents, all correspondence, and agreements. So we have information gathering protocols, information gathering protocol. What are the guidelines through which the tax professional, or standards or procedures through which the tax professional would be using to gather information regarding tax matters from the client? Then create a new file for the client. Create a file for the new client. And within that file, include all relevant documents, correspondence, and also agreements with the new client. This is point number 7. I'll move on to page number 3. Page 3 of my board. And the 8th point is, or matter, is in relation to risk assessment and management. Risk assessment and management. Risk assessment and management. This is done by conducting a risk assessment to identify potential red flags, to identify potential red flags, non-compliance issues, as well as areas requiring special attention. Then implement risk assessment strategies. Implement risk management strategies. At this point, matter that relates to a new client is to implement risk management strategies. Implement risk management strategies in order to address any identified risks or compliance concerns. 9, communication and transparency. Communication and transparency. The tax professional here is required to maintain open and transparent communication with the client throughout the engagement. Open communication. Maintain open communication. Maintain open communication with the new client throughout the engagement. Here, the tax consultant may also clarify the roles, responsibilities, and expectations of both the client and the tax profession. Clarification of roles, responsibilities, expectations, and so on. Clarification of roles, clarification of roles, clarification of responsibilities, expectations. These are roles for the new client. These are also roles expected from the tax consultant, and also expectations from both sides. That is from the client's end and also from the tax professional's end. Clarify roles, responsibilities, and expectations. Then lastly, we have number 10, adherence to ethical standards. Adherence to ethical standards. Adherence to ethical standards. This involves upholding professional ethics, confidentiality, and integrity while serving the new client's interests. Upholding professional ethics. Uphold professional ethics. The tax professional is required to uphold professional ethics, to uphold confidentiality as well as integrity while serving the client's interests. Another matter here is ensuring compliance with professional codes of conduct. Compliance with professional codes of conduct. The tax professional is required to adhere or to comply with professional codes of conduct and regulatory requirements. So candidates, these are matters relating to new clients. I've categorized the matters in 10 parts. Number 1 is initial consultation and engagement. The second broad category is due diligence and client identification. Number 3, conflict of interest and independence. The professional should ensure that there is no conflict of interest that can compromise his objectivity and independence. Number 4, understanding client's tax profile. And that can only happen if the tax professional gathers comprehensive information. This information can be gathered from the tax history of the client, can be gathered from financial statements, and so on. The fifth broad matter is engagement letter and terms of service. The tax professional should ensure that he or she drafts and presents an engagement letter to the new client, and after presenting the letter, the tax consultant should ensure that the client understands the terms and conditions of the engagement, and he or she should seek consent from the client. The sixth matter is compliance and regulatory requirements. Number 7, client intake and process identification. Then number 8, we have risk assessment and management. Number 9, communication and transparency. Number 10, adherence to ethical standards. So candidates, engaging new clients in tax practice demands thorough due diligence, demands compliance with regulations, demands clear communication, demands adherence to ethical and professional standards in order to establish a productive and mutually beneficial professional relationship between the new client and the tax professional. So that marks the end of the lesson, where we have highlighted matters relating to new clients in the tax practice. I'll give you today's assignment, matters relating to new clients. Assignment question number 1. What structured processes or protocols should tax professionals follow when engaging new clients? How do these processes ensure compliance, ethical conduct, and effective client-consultant relationships? Question 2. How do tax professionals conduct risk assessments when taking on new clients? What criteria are considered to ensure that potential risks or conflicts are identified and managed appropriately? Number 3, what steps should tax professionals take to verify the background and authenticity of new clients? How do these steps mitigate potential risks associated with engaging new clients? Lastly, number 4, how do tax professionals establish clear communication and manage expectations with new clients regarding the scope of services, fees, responsibilities, and timelines? So these are questions that you should attempt before coming to our next session. Thank you for attending the lesson. In our next session, we'll be learning how to handle client work, handling of client work. Bye-bye.